Welcome to the Fat Cats Rugby Podcast, bringing you candid rugby conversations, great interviews and insights into Ugandan rugby, and a touch of rugby in Africa and the world over. Fat Cats Rugby Podcast is a product of Fat Cats Media brand for all your audio-visual content needs and equipment hire. Hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Fat Cats Podcast, Rugby Africa Cup edition. Of course, we've had too much days. A lot of rugby has been going on, and of course in rugby, or in Uganda in particular, rugby is a festival. It's not just a game on the pitch. My name is Ruben Kihumuro, and we have a very, very special guest today. I know we say special guest almost every episode, but this one seems particularly special, and because this person is a renowned businessman, a sports administrator, a philanthropist, an economist, and the first Anglophone president of the Rugby Afrique, or Rugby Africa, we should say, Mr. Herbert Mensah. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much indeed.
What was your first impression when you heard that some people calling themselves the Fat Cats Podcast want to talk to you?
Well, first and foremost, I think you need to try and communicate with everybody. The base is one that you want to grow all the time. You have players and supporters who are very young. You have other people from different backgrounds. You're in a new country, so when it is people I work with turn around and say, spare a little bit of time, then you have to spare some time.
Okay. Is this your first time in Uganda?
Second time.
Second time.
Second or perhaps third time in Uganda, but for this purpose, first time.
Okay. What's that one thing about Uganda that caught your eye, or what was the first impression?
I find most places that you go to, unless it is geographically, scenically beautiful, like your lake or something, it's people.
It's people.
So if you have the right person who's inviting you and bringing you into a specific country, that is your lead into the country.
Yeah.
I've been to so many countries. Sometimes you have a bad impression simply because of an encounter at the airport, somebody who didn't do something right. Uganda, I've been fortunate enough to be associated with Godwin, the president of Uganda Rugby.
Yeah.
We've met in different countries, and he has a value system that I kind of get. You know, he seeks perfection. He gets frustrated when he doesn't have perfection. But he's a man of the people. I saw him in Tunisia with the Ugandan team, not sitting in VIP, going and hanging out with the players and the technical people, and which is pretty much how I operate as well. I operate on that basis where you need to have humility with the people that you work with.
Yeah.
I say to people that nobody should call me president. So if you know me, you call me Herbert. They have versions of that. I used to be very big, so they used to call me Big H. Big H, Herbert. Africa, we kind of like people to give us some side of
titles and respect
and that. But it's temporary, as is life.
Yeah.
So if you call me Herbert today, in 2 years when I'm out of this job, you'll see me, you'll call me Herbert. If you call me president today and I'm out in 2 years' time, what are you going to call me? Former president? Or something? So you're in a room with 6 former presidents. Everybody's a president. Everybody's looking. Then when you say, no, current president, somebody's upset. No. When I'm at World Rugby and I meet the chairman of the World Rugby, I call him Bill. I don't call him Sir Bill.
Maybe that is the fact that you have the capacity to call him Bill. I don't think I could go in that room and say, hi, Bill.
Well, you'd probably meet him on the street, and you might say Mr. Beaumont if you don't know.
Exactly.
We can call you Mr. somebody if you want to be formal, but to go overboard with a title, I believe that there is one president, he's the president of my country, President Akufo-Addo, and he's the president. I need to connect with the base that is young. I need to connect with the base that is not very well off. I need to connect with the base that is aspirational.
Yeah.
I need to connect with the base that feels let down by the older generation. I need to connect to the base that is struggling to understand the global geopolitics that is diminishing their spending power and their ability to spend. And you can only connect with that if they believe that they can come to you, if they can talk to you, they can have a debate with you, they can have a difference of opinion after all. If the mass of the populace is 70% or so is under the age of 30 across Africa. And the people who control your lives are between 60 and 90.
I think when you say 60 and 90, you're even being a little too kind. we should push it to 70.
Oh, that's great, because I'm in my 60s, so I'll be happy to move it out of the 60s bracket. So if you go 70 to 90, it's difficult to connect unless it is that you are with the people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So if you're some stages from a rocking chair, then your stages from wanting to be alone, then your stages from wanting to enjoy what you've acquired materially, then you're not going to connect with the 99% of people who haven't reached that point, not that age, don't have, are struggling to survive, struggling to live. And it's that struggle daily that we have to interact with people.
Yeah.
And if you're involved in a sport like rugby that connects with everybody, then you've got to make yourself accessible rather than play big man.
Yeah. Biggest similarities and differences for you when it comes to your experience in Uganda versus Ghana?
Well, Africa is one beautiful continent, but we're different people.
Very.
The climate here is completely different from West Africa. Somebody said, "Oh, it's hot." And
Yeah,
I said,
that was the biggest complaint that came from the contingent that traveled to Ghana for the games. They were saying that you could not sleep without AC on.
yeah, you see, so it's a different situation where, so you take the climate. This is beautiful. Look, I'm not sweating. I'm wearing a jacket.
I know.
There's no way in Ghana I'll be wearing a jacket. You know, it may not be that hot in real terms, 32 degrees, 35 degrees, but the humidity is 90%. So at 6 a.m., 3 a.m., it's 26, 28 degrees.
Okay.
You see, so hotter than it is now outside. And it's like that all year round.
Wow.
You see?
Wow.
So it's that kind of tropical situation. It drops a couple of degrees. Humidity is massively high. So that's the first thing that will strike you. If you take the different weather system, then you'll see the fruit is different. Some of the fruit is the same, but the food is different. You know, so those are the things you recognize as being different. I think the structure of the towns, the cities are different to go with your own ecosystem as to where you are. People, what I've met so far, I've met friendly, nice people. I've met people who seem to respect themselves, which is critical. I've met the youth who are the same the world over. I keep telling people, you know, a 20-year-old in Ghana is the same as a 20-year-old here. It's the same as a 20-year-old in London. It's the same as a 20-year-old anywhere. Aspirational, internet savvy, tech savvy, great sense of right and wrong, not afraid of anything.
Yeah.
You know, so that structure of being is the same, whether it's in Ghana or in Uganda.
Okay. It's interesting. So, Rugby Africa Cup this year is in Uganda. How did that conversation even start?
Like with most things, it starts with people. You've got some people who get it and some people who don't get it.
Yeah.
Let me put people into that bracket. People who get it and people who don't get it. Then you've got another group of people, those who operate with the glass half full and those who operate with the glass half empty. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then another group of people who believe they need to copy other people to be somebody. Then others who realize they can drive their own destiny. So if you take the first groups of people, 1, 2, 3, and then you speak to the right people. So connecting with Godwin, it was easy. What was my vision for Rugby Africa was that you should have countries like Uganda, I use like because they've accepted it, who understand the need to accept to put on greatness. And this Rugby Africa Cup is great. The hosting rights and the picking up of a hosting cost, Uganda. Other countries, they say you got to pay to do it there and that. So it changes the dynamic completely. And this was mooted around the whole continent. The first person to raise his hand, it wasn't, let me think about it, let me take this proposal, think about it, is Godwin. He turns around, he says, I know my people, my countrymen, I know what we have to offer, we can do it. So we move from there, let us start exchanging, we start moving. I have the opportunity to speak to your Minister of Sport, extraordinary gentleman. Extraordinary because he's a Minister of Sport. Many people are ministers of sport, but they're
Yeah.
not meant to be ministers of sport. I deal with them all across the continent of Africa. And many are just sitting in a portfolio, and you're beginning to wonder that, geez, man, you're in a portfolio that's dealing with 85% of the population. Global sport is global sport.
Yeah.
It's no longer about taking a ball, kicking it in the park, and coming home. From nutrition to strength fitness coaching to the discipline that's involved in sports,
Yeah.
that winning is everything these days, not just participating. But in order to do that, you need to take a medium-term view. You don't look for the results today. You say over 3-year, 5-year, this is the trajectory you want to go, knowing that the whole world is trying to do exactly the same thing.
Okay.
And that's where your minister gets it. Godwin definitely gets it. And here we are. Rugby Africa Cup 2024 is here in Kampala.
Yeah, definitely. And just getting a little bit off from Rugby Africa. March 2023, you were appointed Rugby Africa president. And there's this saying that the first 100 days in office, blah, blah, blah. But me, I'm going to go with the first 1 year in office. How has that experience been like for you?
It's been both fantastic, exhilarating, sad, disappointing. It's a cocktail of emotions. I'm the first Anglophone president of Rugby Africa on a continent that is predominantly Francophone in terms of those involved in our sport. And you're trying to bring rugby as one, as we say, and bring it into one context. You're also trying to do something. I come from the world of football before.
Yes.
I was the chairman of Kumasi Asante Kotoko,
Definitely one thing we have to get into, but
one of the great teams in African football, which I transformed over a 5-year period. But in trying to transform sport in Africa from traditional into modern and successful, you have resistance.
Definitely.
And so in taking over Rugby Africa, I've said sport is big business, but I said from beginning you need a mindset change starting internally.
Okay.
And that is the biggest challenge. How do you get people who have been used to seeing things going in a certain way to move and change and understand that Rome was not built in a day, but you need to change this big oil tanker that is moving down one way into another direction.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you cannot compete, you cannot grow. You need to change your competition base. You need to attract more money. But if you've raised money before, and I have in sports my whole life, it is not going to beg. It's not this third world syndrome of, I beg, give me money because I want to play a rugby tournament.
Yes.
It's about trying to change the image of the organization that you're involved in. Change the image of those who talk and speak for you. Change the image of how they see you. Raise expectations. Then you start to put in a competition deck. You start to create opportunities, understanding that there is a global bar.
Yeah.
Understanding that we are the champions of the world. South African Springboks are in Africa. They're the double champions of the world. If you recognize that, then you recognize that you have the pure talent. You have the genetic pool on the continent. That means that you can achieve and be anything. Now, the people who are involved with you have got to change their mind. There's got to be a fundamental mindset change that says we will accept an Anglophone leader. We will accept that we're not doing well enough as Rugby Africa as an organization.
Yeah.
We have to move away from crying the cry. Crying the cry is, we're 1.4 billion people. We're 41 members of Rugby Africa. We're 21 members of World Rugby within Rugby Africa. We receive only $2.2 million a year from World Rugby.
Yeah.
$2.2 million is not enough to share across the continent. You can't have competition space, buy tickets, take care of hotels, take care of training, etc., 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 within that context.
Yeah.
So to argue about it and to say it's not good enough and you've got to change it and why me and why me, actually the world doesn't care.
Does it?
It doesn't care. So that mindset change has been the biggest challenge within Rugby Africa.
Yeah.
Some get it, a lot still don't get it. They say, you've come to power, you should have changed it on day one. Because you don't change it on day one, we have a problem. even though for 30 years they've never been able to change it.
To change it, but you are the problem.
But you then become the problem. And that is a mindset change,
Yeah.
sadly, among some of the members of Rugby Africa. You do have others who get it and understand that everything is a work in progress.
Yeah.
That if you look in the last 12 months, look at our way we've run our competitions. Mauritius was never like that. Over 2 weekends, of which Uganda won. Okay?
Yeah.
It was done in line with the World Challengers Series.
Yes.
So now you're going to World Challengers Series, you can compete knowing you understand that competition base.
Yeah.
But it costs more money. Now we've got the Rugby Africa Cup. I was there yesterday. Oh my word. I have to be careful not to swear, right?
Feel free. It's a
Careful.
plus 18.
Careful. Oh my word, the quality of the rugby was stupendous. The physicality of the team, the players.
Yeah.
They were giants that were big enough if they were in the Springbok squad or the French or the English or the All Black, they would not look out of place.
Yeah.
Some of those players were 140, 160 kilos. Mobile, could play in the sun over the full 80 minutes. So that is a big difference I saw, that people brought their A game here in preparation for next year's World Cup qualifiers. So there's a prep for it. To see a country like Zimbabwe beat the mighty Namibian, who have always been to every World Cup, was something to behold. To see Algeria beat Kenya was a shock for most people to see. So you can see that the game is changing and the quality is changing. I mean, we're here on a podcast, a giant just blacked out the sunlight, walking behind me, just to give an indication of just the sheer enormity of the size that says Africa and sports, rugby, we do have the genetic type to be able to compete globally at any level. Already we know we are the fastest, the trickiest. We can swerve, we can stop on a dime. We are fearless, we can tackle, we can hit. We've got the ingredients to make greatness.
Yeah.
But we need more Godwins, more Ugandans to create that competition base to make it work.
Yeah.
Then we need to start working on the countries that want to play rugby.
Okay.
Don't even have a rugby field. Governments are not supporting them because your biggest contributors should be government. It's not World Rugby. It's not Rugby Africa. It should be governments. The same way as governments support football and support you going to the Olympics, they should look at a sport who has got the best value system of respect, teamwork, the fact that you can be 90 kilos. I'm 120 something kilos. Some of those guys were 150 kilos. And yet somebody of 65 kilos may be the most important person on the pitch.
Definitely.
You can't do that with football.
Definitely.
But rugby, it says like with society where somebody's big, somebody's short, somebody's dark, somebody's fair. Rugby accommodates everybody. And we need to get through to governments to recognize what that does for society and therefore start investing in schools and school levels, because South Africa, Zimbabwe, Kenya, to some extent Uganda, lead the way in Africa because your school system is what makes it work. And if the school system is good, then you know that your playing body will come from where it is that you kind of develop. Another one.
Yeah.
And
of
another
course,
one.
I know there are so many, and I think it's time for meals or something. I don't know where they're all going to.
They're going to eat cow. They're going to eat cows. Fish, they won't fish.
You know, the most interesting thing about being here, of course, we're at the Speke Resort Hotel, but they spent match day 1 and match day 2 tackling themselves silly, but they're all here talking to themselves. It doesn't have to be, regardless of what country you're from. That all stops on the pitch, and now there's so many friends, and that's the beauty of rugby. I think that's what you're talking about.
That is the beauty of rugby. These are the things that rugby makes it possible. We don't care your ethnicity.
Yes.
We don't care the shade of color that you are. You're right, they're all going to go into that dining room, and when you go in, you'll see them all seated, and they're eating, laughing, joking. Those who lost yesterday will be wishing they'd won, but look, they're here. There's no shouting. You don't have that football chemistry of...
In Uganda, there's a saying that make sure you're not on the food line after the Senegalese. You may not find anything.
I don't want to comment, otherwise I'll get in trouble with my Senegalese friends. But
but anyway, of course, special shout out to our sponsors, Nile Special, that make all this possible. Today we're at a special location, Speke Resort Munyonyo, where we are talking to, of course, Rugby Africa President Herbert Mensah. But Your position currently, what's your day or your week like? I mean, I came here and you were in a bevy of meetings. And personally, I really hate too many meetings. You know, some of these meetings can really be emails, but what's your typical day like? What's your week like?
Well, it's quite intense. You can, as president, take different roles. One that is that you're not really getting involved too much.
Yeah.
And let other people do and walk around and say you're a big person. But I recognize there's a dynamic shift that's required within Rugby Africa. So you lay that foundation, so whoever comes after you has a foundation. If he agrees with the direction that you're going, then you move in that direction. So it's full on. Not because I'm here in Uganda, it generally is.
Yeah.
Just trying to change the baseline. And the baseline is, how do you reposition rugby in such a way that capital looks at you differently? I've tried with mindset change to let people understand that it is only changed relationships, which come from changed mindset, that will attract capital.
Okay.
If you can't change your mindset, it's not going to change. So I used to say of Madiba, before the great man passed, I had the occasion to meet him on a few occasions. One was a private visit at his home, and I left there telling the gentleman that I was with that this gentleman is the chief marketing officer for South Africa. That's who Nelson Mandela is. You want to go to South Africa because of Nelson Mandela. He is the chief marketing officer.
Yeah.
And in many ways, I'm the chief marketing officer for Rugby Africa. Tough, but if I can bring all sides together, from French, from English, from those who wish, whatever, then it is that we are now rowing in the same direction, saying we need to make more Rugby Africa Cups. We need to change our under-20s and include more countries. We need to source money from elsewhere. Our relationship with World Rugby, French Rugby, SARU, banks, institutions has got to evolve to the point that we now see capital inflows coming in, and we're in a position to change the way we represent.
Oh, that's interesting. And of course, you flew in, had a presser, and then experienced match day 2, but I'm sure you caught match day 1 online as well. What has been your general experience of organization? I know you've talked a little bit about the rugby, but just how the event has come out to be.
You're right, I was here for match day 2. I was super impressed. The pitch was extraordinary. The streaming from people calling me around the world, telling me it was working. I mean, a few glitches on match day 1, match day 2, completely gone. And it became a festival. I set up a communications department. One of the things I did at Rugby Africa when I came in was to take over comms and to set up a structure where at least the dissemination of news, information, the imagery of the moment was being released continuously. And I think that was done very successfully indeed. So we look at it in terms of entertainment fund, the standards. You look to make sure you don't have injuries. We have a backup at Rugby Africa to make sure that on the technical side, the medical side, the officiating side, there's a whole team that is in place ready for the tournament. And so far, despite some of those monumental collisions I was seeing, everybody's good.
Yeah, and then with the broadcasting, how do you think it can be bettered or it can contribute more for rugby in Africa?
Well, Africa has major challenges, doesn't it? Because Africa is Africa. If you take this region, it's very easy for Kenya, Uganda, and Inter-SADC to cooperate. You'll have similar media houses, you've got similar banks, sponsors. But Africa tries to organize itself on this gigantic scale, where it is, what is good for you here is of no good for us in West Africa, and vice versa.
Yeah.
What is good in North Africa may not be good in Southern Africa. In countries where Arabic is spoken before French, how do you get a common media partner to communicate and pay you money when maybe their audience is Arabic or maybe the audience is French? So we're seeing dynamic changes coming during the Mauritius tournament and this tournament.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see World Rugby Pass, Rugby Pass
Yeah, Rugby
is
Pass.
covering this, which means every rugby lover anywhere in the world is watching this tournament. In Mauritius, we had Super Sport. Next time round, we'll also have Super Sport here. I'm very sure about that. So we're changing the dynamics of how we watch, not to mention that we're on social media, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on wherever we can reach and get out of there. And I think we have to continue in this direction. For 2025, we need to be able to evolve this to the point where commercial entities see the opportunity to also manage interest and sponsorship and the rest ongoing on social media platforms.
Yeah.
We need to see greater interaction. I would love to see MTN, Vodafone, whoever it is, starting to do competitions online before the game, and people can get bundles and bouquets and they can see that they're getting. Because the issue about money,
Yes.
you need to be able to prove to somebody you've got something to give back to them.
Yes, definitely.
No, this old way
Value
of
proposition.
thank you. This old way of, because we are in football or we're in rugby, give us money. It doesn't work like that.
Yes.
So we're building a platform this year, the end of last year, this year, that takes you into 2025, that anybody who's serious about giving money looks and says, wow, the quality of the game is something else. Wow. We could be on Supersport. Wow.
Yeah.
The Rugby Pass is viewing this. Wow. There are guys like you that are saying, we will do podcasts one day live at a match.
Yeah.
And we'll do other interviews and go, but we're not going to do breaking and come in, or in between matches, take it somewhere else. And suddenly it is you say, actually, we're going to be a part of, and we can see where we're going, and we're going to grow our numbers. So businesses want to grow their numbers, they want to grow their opportunities. And we in Rugby Africa have got to understand that we're the platform for growth. And if people grow, then they want to come and give back to us.
Yeah, I think that's true. And the beauty about this conversation is once we're talking about one thing, I don't know if it's telepathy on your end, but there's a way you're jumping into the next thing, which is amazing. Sponsorship has generally been a problem across the board in sport in general in Africa, but then in particular in rugby, it's a cry. If I'm to speak for just Uganda, of course, which I've experienced the most locally with the clubs, that is a big challenge to make sure that they make a lot of their ends meet. Are there any programs or any trainings or any assistance that Rugby Africa is maybe looking at with the local unions to see how they can put these clubs and these, maybe let me say, organizations in a position where they can present themselves with the new mindset you've talked about, that is focusing on them providing value and then getting return, and maybe some other business models that can also bring back some money to help them survive?
The problem in sports, especially in Africa, is, and I talk from rugby and for football, it's quite often the people who are involved in it.
Yeah.
So you can talk and give tuition and give example, but if the wrong people are at the helm, it's never going to work, and that is the biggest challenge. I think that if you look at sponsorship in general, you have general donor fatigue globally. Most of the world has not recovered from COVID. Businesses, this is.
Yeah.
And startup businesses are struggling to make a mark. So one is having to be very careful in assuming that because I'm doing this, I will get that. A lot of companies went through massive losses over that period and are alive today, and they're trying to make their money back so they can create stability.
Yeah.
So that is a massive, massive challenge. It doesn't mean that you can't raise money. It means that you need to be creative, you need to think out of the box, and you need a different kind of person. Yes, mindset change, but a different kind of a person. You also understand that money is generally friendly with money. You know, I keep trying to tell people, and sometimes you're talking to deaf ears, but you know, you're sitting there, you're talking, give me money, and I'm thinking, do you have a friend who's got money? The answer is no. Yeah, see. The point I'm making, and I'm being a bit facetious, but the point I'm making is that you need to get people into the institutions themselves who get it. You see, if you get it, you're not going to discuss money with somebody on the side of the street who's asking you for $5, $10.
Yeah.
You need to get more people involved in the sport, you know, who get it, and therefore they understand that you go to this meeting, you go there, they got friends who owe them, people that you can then turn around and say, look, we've got this gig going, we've got the Victoria Cup, we've got Safari Sevens, and you don't even have to give them a document, they get it. Money's friend is money, and their owners are exactly the same. It's very rare, and you'll find it as a young guy.
Yeah.
How many proposals have you sent to people? How many proposals have you sent to people to say, you're doing this, you're on podcasts, you're streaming this, this is the future, and you know that this is the product. You go in with that paper. The first of all, first mistake you make is you don't realize you're talking to the wrong person. You're talking to a marketing manager. You're talking to a sales and so on.
Sometimes you're not talking to the decision maker.
You're not talking to the decision maker. And then have you done a profile to see whether the decision maker even gets it? You see, so you go in and you've got the best proposal.
Yeah.
Now you're using AI and the proposal looks even better. And you've got it in print form, hard copy, soft copy. You can throw it out there with acoustics and blow the guy's mind away. And he doesn't get it. So raising money is not a straightforward thing.
Yeah.
And trying to get people, even in Rugby Africa, to understand that.
Yeah.
They don't understand it. So, so it's a difficult situation where you wish you could build a base of people who got it. So there's a commercial arm.
Yeah.
And that commercial arm kind of gets it. You're rebranding yourself. So you can't call it rebranding. But we're here in Uganda. We're rebranding ourselves.
True.
You get it. We're in Mauritius. The kind of tournament we had, we're rebranding ourselves. So as you're taking the product in a certain direction, you have others who are taking it in this direction. They think it should be the same as yesteryear. But it's only when you rebrand and change the way you look, change what you have to offer, that it is that money then looks at you once. That means you missed out first year. Second year, they're thinking, let me give a chance to this. And third year, they're running to be ahead of the crowd who want to be with you and put money into your product.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that ideally I have observed, and also from the conversations that have been coming up, we are privileged to have a Monday Twitter space or X space. I don't know if anyone actually wants to call it X, but we have a space every Monday.
Elon does.
Elon, apart from Elon, I don't think anyone calls it X. But we have a space where we do the roundup of the weekend, and we talk about different things rugby. So one of the conversations that came up, we of course with Rugby Africa now, we've been having a privilege to have some Zimbabweans on, some Kenyans on, and it brought about the thought of, you talked about the sevens, the Africa Sevens, and how they transitioned from a one weekend tournament to now focusing on 2 weekends in line with the World Challenger Series. Do you think, or what do you think can be done to better the Rugby Africa Cup 15s format? Of course, right now, as it stands, it being you're starting from match day 1 and it's knockout. If you lose, you're in placement games. If you win, then you go to the semi-finals. But is that sustainable in number of games played if we are trying to make sure that our nations are getting more test rugby?
Well, it's all about money. And sport is big business. I would love to have 3 groups of 4. So you play within that.
Yeah.
Then you then progress. That means you can lose. After all, we saw South Africa lose to Ireland in the World Cup and become world champions. And the World Cup before, they lost to the All Blacks and become world champions later. So you can. But you're in a situation where in the old days we'd be playing a 4-team tournament. So this is a massive progression. Next year will be the same 8 teams. But in the future, I would love to see a situation, but this year we've created relegation promotion.
Yeah.
We've got hopefully Morocco doing 9 to 16, so the winners from that will come up and the losers from here will go down. So it is a work in progress, but for the first time we have 16 teams playing 15 all in within 1 year. And if there are 20 or so World Rugby members, that means the vast majority of World Rugby are now playing 15s a year.
Okay. Then just going sports in general, of course, just to particularly even highlight this so I don't make a mistake, you are board chairman of Kumasi Asante Kotoko, which is one of the biggest clubs in football in Africa, bestowed on you by the monarch of the Ashanti Kingdom First, I want to understand how the Ashanti Kingdom owns a football club, but that's something we're going to get into. But how was that experience like?
For me, it was extraordinary. I'm an economist by training. I have a slightly different profile, but I believe anybody can do anything.
Yeah.
And it was a great team that was in the doldrums.
Yeah.
We changed it. We changed the imagery of it. We started putting 40, 60,000 into the stadium for domestic matches. We rebranded it. We respected the tradition of the club. The club, you're absolutely right, belongs to the king of the Ashantis. He is the spiritual leader of our people.
Oh, so you are Ashanti?
I'm Ashanti, but
Okay.
you can have non-Ashantis running it. But
Okay.
I have actually happen to be Ashanti.
Okay.
So he's the spiritual head. And I guess when you're called in, it's a privilege. When you're called in to run the team,
Yeah.
I try to be transformational.
Okay.
Transformational then brings you into conflict with a lot of people who prefer that things stay the
Habit
same.
and change, very, very difficult.
It's the
thing.
story of my life. Everywhere I go, there are people who wish that nothing will change because they want to stay where they are and complain about where they could be, rather than embracing change to take you. But we did.
Yeah.
We reached the final of the Africa Confederation Cup in my third year. We turned the team around. We'd filled the stadiums. We'd given a sense of direction. It was back to greatness again.
What was the one strategy that helped you to fill the stadiums? Because that translates into funds.
It starts for me first with communication.
Yeah.
We changed the entire communication base to start with. We started our own newspaper, which became the highest selling newspaper in the country, selling more than any political newspaper. I wrote a full column in that paper myself,
Okay.
full column. So that's a lot of work being written out every day. We changed what happened at the gates of the stadium. We published all gate fees, revenues every single week.
Accountability, very important.
Clear, especially amongst the stakeholders. We recognized the most important stakeholders were not the big men.
Yeah.
The most important stakeholders were the supporters. That person whose weekly salary, maybe that match ticket to go to the stadium, you got to respect that guy. You got to. So we gave massive respect. We built up the hype on the days before big matches.
Yeah.
In Kumasi, a city of about 3 million odd people, we would go into the middle of town and get the top artists and have
Yeah.
a midnight jamboree and let them know we would be there the following day.
Okay.
We
That's
eventually
nice.
started introducing live music into the stadiums. So whoever was like the musician of the day would be there, and before kickoff there would be a whole music fest. So we could start 2-3 hours before a match, a whole entertainment kind of carnival
Basically creating
effect.
the whole experience and not just a
Absolutely.
football game.
You recognize that everybody has money that they spend for something.
Yes.
So in the poorer communities, they respect the dead. They respect. So funerals are a big thing as part of the Ashanti culture. So you find people at weekends going to pay respect to somebody who's dead. That's money.
Yeah.
Money in attire, money in transport, money in food. And what you're trying to say is don't spend the money there. Or leave a little bit and come to the stadium to be entertained.
Yeah.
And I've got to be sure that I give you the greatest entertainment that you will ever have had. You will leave that stadium talking about every aspect of the entertainment.
Yeah.
I would like to think that people are going to get into Rugby Africa thinking, we came to the fan zone in Kampala. We watched Uganda do well, yes. But we also saw Zimbabwe do well, etc. And it was something to behold. So the next time you're doing something, everybody wants to come.
Okay. Ghana Rugby Union president from
Former.
2014. Yeah, Ghana Rugby Football Union president. How was that journey like?
Interesting, difficult. We're not really a rugby playing nation, so
Yes.
introducing systems that people didn't understand has brought conflict over the years. The same thing as
Yeah.
you'll get everywhere, same thing as you'll get here. But what it did do is that by the time I left, the Ghana ladies were ranked number 8 in Africa for a country that doesn't play rugby. The men were ranked, we were here in Kampala 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
We beat Algeria here. We got thrashed by Uganda, and then we beat Algeria, who then thrashed
Yes,
Uganda.
I think I watched that game. Yeah, I do remember.
You see, so
Yeah.
certainly by taking the same methodology that is required for sports today in terms of nutrition, preparation, training, fitness, getting the mindset right, etc., 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 we were able to be competitive enough to come play.
Okay. So from all that experience, from Asante Kotoko to the Ghana Rugby Football Union, what one thing would you point out as a leader that you've learned and that you've brought into Rugby Africa?
You need to be able to plan.
Yeah.
You need to be brave.
Brave.
You need to be brave. It's very easy to be the president of Rugby Africa and do nothing. They say, oh, this is the president of Rugby Africa, and I come and nod my head. And the systems that don't work,
Yeah.
the rot that is there, the people who are so inherently ethnocentric, etc., continues.
Okay.
So you have no competition here. You have a one weekender in Mauritius or somewhere else. Things just simply don't. Things simply will not work, and then you simply have to accept that
Yeah.
as a norm in terms of moving forward.
Okay.
So it's very easy to do that, or you can turn around and say you are looking to bring about change.
Okay.
And in order to bring about change, you need to bring in new people, new systems, new opportunities.
Yeah.
But it's the bravery that will get you through that. Because the minute you start doing that, you're going to have people now working against you, people who demonize you,
Yeah.
people who don't want to see the change. It's always the people who can't do it themselves. It's often the people
that's a
who...
powerful statement.
It's always the people who can't do it themselves. I used to say, when the guy says, look, I'm doing an MBA and my professor is the brightest guy in the world, and I say, yeah, but that's why he's not Dangote. I'm saying that's
quite fascinating why the economist or the lecturer of economy or the professor of economy is not the guy that's...
Absolutely.
That's
it's a lot
there.
easier. And I'm not denigrating the professors. They're
Yeah.
brilliant people. But it comes exactly the same. How often have I run a sporting institution? Not just this. I've encouraged others. I've transformed women's rugby in Ghana by taking it from the men and giving it to the women, taking away the budget from the men and giving it to the women, letting them operate their own competition space,
Yeah.
letting them understand that there's a global standard in preparation, fitness, nutrition, strength, whatever else may be, and the psychological preparation. Then you look and you see the people who object to what you do. So you hang around 2-3 days and go through the corridors, you'll see people saying, wow, what a tournament you're having here in Uganda. Incredible. Rugby Africa has never done anything like that. Wow, did you see this? It's a shame that Uganda didn't do well in the first half against Zimbabwe. The second half, they destroyed them. There'll be commentary. There'll be feeling, emotion, passion that will talk about it. Then the others will be saying, oh, look at the atmosphere, it's great. Within that, you then, if you move to the wrong place, you find people saying, hey, this guy is no good. And you say, why? You say, oh, he's changed this, he's changed that, he's changed this and he's changed that. And he's a bad person. They say, oh, is that right? You see? So you got to look out and see the way that people are going to represent. And then you have to decide whether you see a day where you think that Africa can play rugby at every level on the global stage in a way that is not just the Springboks, but now it is Zimbabwe, it is Uganda, it's Kenya, it's Algeria, are now all on the precipice where we can now take the fight back to World Rugby and say you need to create 2 or 3 more slots for Africa because we are more than good enough.
Okay. For those that are watching us, of course, one thing you should look out for is at the Gardens, Nigeria, this Saturday, 27th of July, there's going to be the East Africa Mid Carnival. So that is one thing that you need to go and be a part of, experience the diversity of meaty treats and great music, good vibes and all that. The Gardens, Nigeria, look out for that this weekend. And if you can't make it this weekend, just look out for every last Saturday of the month for the East Africa Mid Carnival. So the last bit of rugby I want us to talk about before we get to know a little bit about you is rugby in Africa. What can we do to really make sure we catch up with the rest of the world on the pitch? I'm now looking at it on the pitch. Most of course, the nations that play in Africa are termed as Tier 3 nations. and then we are trying to aspire, or when we go to a World Cup, we play Tier 1 nations. There's a big gap you can normally see from the conditioning, sometimes from the exposure. What can we do to catch up?
Well, I think we've in part discussed it in terms of putting structures in place, changing our competition base, changing the relationships between ourselves and government. Sports in general requires that triangle.
Yeah.
And I always say, at the head of the triangle is government. Is government. Then it is that you have capital and then the resource, which is ourselves. You need a marriage between the three. Because if you do, take Oceania, 40% of all revenue is from government. Okay. Come into Africa, there are some countries who receive nothing. Ghana receives nothing over 8-9 years. We never received $1 from the Ministry of Sports for the development of the game or anything. So you need to reach a point where that marriage is so solid between government on one side and then capital on another side. Then genetically we have what it takes. We have the sportsmen. We have those who are truly great and can make it up at a certain level.
Yeah.
But they do need the support and that structure. Once you get that, then we can start talking about media, communication, other related matters.
Yeah.
Put it on the front page for people to understand. But if government now insists that it's part of the school curriculum, and now it's in schools, after all, some of the greatest talent will be in some small village somewhere in Uganda that you don't know about. You know, and you'll go into that place and you'll find somebody truly exceptional.
Yeah.
In a previous life, I run MNET. I was probably the first person that MNET started dealing with in Africa, East, West, North, South.
Yeah.
And I was part of the team that created Face of Africa. And I remember we went looking for Face of Africa. And a lady who was Charmaine was working with MNET and we're working together, stumbled in Nigeria on a lady called Oluchi.
Okay.
If you Google Oluchi, you see Oluchi, she must be a bit older now, but was a supermodel. The point is that Charmaine saw her in the market in Nigeria.
Okay.
All 6'1" of her, so slim that maybe within our African context would have said she needed to be bigger to be deemed to be attractive.
Yeah.
Plucked her out, and she became this supermodel. The point I'm making is, you go into some village in Uganda somewhere that nobody's thinking about, you will find that athlete that can sidestep you without, and you will be looking this way and the person's gone that way. Whose first blast to 10 meters is so fast that you can't even reach him. Whose center of gravity, you are laughing at him because he looks short, but he's so low, he could be a prop and get underneath any other prop. So it is about that. And it's expanding and getting them at school level and getting them up. Yeah. So that marriage between the three has got to be solidified.
Yeah, so talking about the Rugby World Cup, qualifiers, of course, are going to be underway next year. But Africa has 2 slots and has had 2 slots for a minute. And that bothers me so much as a person, as a passionate rugby fan. Is there any hope of us getting more slots?
It actually doesn't bother me.
Why?
Let me explain.
Okay.
I came under quite a bit of criticism because the Nations Cup, 24 nations was voted on, and they said we didn't fight hard enough for a specific slot for Africa. And I explained this. Africa are the world champions in the Springboks. I believe the rest of Africa is on a trajectory and a growth to greatness. But I don't believe it's now.
Okay.
If Namibia is the best team in Africa, and it has been to every World Cup since we started World Cups in Africa going, and they have 90 points put on them by New Zealand, and they can then put 40 points, 38 points on Burkina Faso. Does that mean Burkina Faso, if you give them a slot, should go to the World Cup? And what then would be the player welfare? What would be our ability? The point I'm making is I believe that rugby in Africa needs to continue on this trajectory. I've come to Kampala and seen some of the biggest rugby players I've seen this side of wherever. Big enough. They will not feel disgraced if they're standing amongst the Springboks, the English rugby. They're big boys. So genetically now, we've got people coming out who are big enough. Are we going to teach them how to play? Is their strength and conditioning going to go with that? Is their nutrition going to work? Then are we going to give them competition for them to be playing regularly? A player from Scotland may play 10 to 15 test matches a year. A player here in Uganda may play just this as his only test match. And it's only when you play, you know it.
Yeah.
So I believe that is coming. And I believe that you're going to have, in the next 5 years, 4 to 6 African countries who are now good enough. They're hitting the top 30.
Yeah.
And therefore, they're within the top 30 teams. And therefore, they'll now go through a slot basis. You know, at that point when World Rugby is looking at a strategic realignment, then we're now talking about an extra place. Right now, the winner here next year goes to the World Cup.
Yeah.
The runner-up goes into a challenger repechage situation to try and go.
Yeah.
By that time, that person will go through there and will qualify for the World Cup. I do believe that Africa has what it takes in the right circumstance.
Okay. So, enough of the rugby.
Good.
Let us first try something else. About you. First, let's talk about your philanthropy. May 9th Foundation. First of all, why that name? Why May 9th Foundation?
Well, really because I was chairman of Kumasi Asante Kotoko when one of the world's worst stadium disasters occurred. I was the chairman. I was in the stadium that day where 126 to plus, because they don't have the exact numbers, of people died when there was a riot in the stadium. Police fired tear gas. A lot of the supporters could not leave the stadium. And they died of asphyxiation and they died. And that is the one single moment that has changed my life.
Okay.
And I dedicated myself to establishing the May 9th Foundation.
Okay.
Every year since that year, we've done something, either for the families, it's moved on care and this, and then we've joined with a lot of other foundations who are helping the poor, the needy, and the rest.
Yeah.
And that's what the May 9th Foundation's been doing.
Yeah, okay. So in regards to business, I know you have touched on a couple of things that you have been doing throughout your journey, but mobile handset distribution in sub-Saharan Africa, apart from South Africa, but to a point where you are one of the biggest distributors, if not the biggest distributor, and working like in TV with Mnet, as you said, and extending their broadcast beyond South Africa. And maybe you can tell us about any of the other businesses that you indulge in, but what's that like for you? How are you balancing everything, and how does everything be moving? And how did also this point of the mobile handset, how did that whole journey start?
Well, just briefly, because I generally don't talk
summarize
about a lot of my background. But
Yeah.
there's another charity of which I'm the secretary. I run. I'm very proud to be involved because after the stadium disaster, I've dedicated a lot of my life to helping people who can't help themselves. So I'm the secretary I have business partners who I do business with.
Yeah.
One organization called the Sunda Group. And we established a foundation at the beginning of last year. The funding for it comes from the owner of Sunda. I'm a part of it. And it's named after his two children, Shen Yang and Shen Yue, who is his family background. And we have been doing hole-in-the-heart surgery for children.
Okay.
So by the end of this year, we started last year, we'd have done already 70 operations of hole-in-the-heart. I'm very proud of that when you see a child come back to life, when you change a family, and they're poor people. We're not dealing with the rich people. So poor people who could never, ever afford the fee for that. And you know, hole in the heart can be from anything from $7,000, $8,000 to $15,000 to save a child's life. So that's the main area that I'm particularly happy about. In business, no, I was at one stage within the top 10 largest mobile phone dealers in the world for cellular telephony.
Yeah.
It came starting from Ghana, dealing with the networks. Ghana was the first country to start mobile cellular telephony in Africa.
Okay.
In the e-tax technology before we went to GSM and so forth. And I managed through them to become a dealer for Motorola. So I dealt with Motorola for many years. And then I moved to Ericsson and then finally with Nokia. So that was that. My markets were meant to be just in Africa, but they were global in terms of what it is I did. And that was the biggest, I guess, mainstay. I've consulted for many others. I helped bring DSTV into many parts of Africa. I worked with a number of great gentlemen, Etienne Haynes, Russell McMillan, people who set up SuperSport, the Mnet channels themselves. For many years, I've worked with the BBC as well in different areas. And then I run a lot of my own businesses. I'm into agriculture. Beyond agriculture, I'm into media in my part of the world. I'm into sports, football, other related matters like that. And I do general consult for major organizations.
When I hear you speak, I think of those when some of these corporations are putting out job ads and they're talking about 20-year experience and whatnot from young people. That just came to my mind because that looks like way too much experience. I wonder how long your resume can be.
There are a lot of things not on the resume.
Interesting.
There are a lot of things not on the resume. Most of the things I find I get into things that people don't want to do.
Okay.
If you're going to do something everybody can do, so you look at angles around the same in order to achieve. Motorola never gave dealerships to individuals. They gave them to networks.
Okay.
But because now I'm telling Motorola that I can facilitate the importation and the wholesaling of your brand in a way that others can't, and then getting the operators to say, this guy can, it becomes the open. Then you need to move from there and say you have problems in other countries. Even at that stage, I understood it was not about the sale of a telephone.
Yeah.
It's about supply chain economics. So supply chain management is delivering a product to people who want a product, when they want it, how they want it.
Yeah.
If you get it, then you get it. If you don't, then you think you're selling a phone. You see, and that pretty much has been my philosophy. We started this conversation talking about rugby and the growth and so on and so forth. And you look at your business. At some point in time, you have to look and say, what exactly are you dealing and what are you delivering? You see, because money has no eyes. So at what point in time there's money that wants to move so quickly and come back to source? Identify your product as a product that it needs to step in and be your partner in that journey. If you get that, you can deal with anything.
Okay.
So I'm totally unemotive. You never hear me talking about Nokia, Motorola, nothing. Never.
Okay.
Never.
I know we said we're not going to talk about rugby again, but I was doing some reading about you, and one of the things I found was that you also did play some rugby at Sussex and Saracens, and I'm a big Saracens fan, so I'm trying to align. Is that the Saracens that you played for?
I only know one Saracens. I played Saracens before Nigel Ray took it over and pumped in billions.
Okay.
Don't forget I'm 64. I guess the height of my career, if you can call it that, would have been I played junior rugby in England. I played provincial rugby in England. They used to play provincial rugby in England.
Okay.
They don't really play provincial rugby in England anymore, but they used to. And I played provincial rugby in England, good club rugby. And then I went to work in Zimbabwe just after independence, just after Mugabe came to power. Rugby was very strong. I played then for Mashonaland.
Okay.
I played one international for Italy. I was the only black person playing rugby in those days for club rugby in Zim. Isn't that interesting?
Very, very.
Yeah. I played for OH, Old Herrerians. Then I went back to England. I joined Saracens, went up through the tiers, and the same season I was playing Saracens first.
Okay.
Then I got injured after that. I went back to West Africa. I played a bit of rugby. And then I got on with my life.
Okay. And this is, judging from your stature, is it second row?
No, you'll never guess it in a million years.
Really?
No. At Saracens, I played for what we call the Fatties Club.
Okay.
And the Fatties Club had Lawrence Smith on one wing. He was playing at 19 and a half stone on the wing.
Wow.
and played professional rugby for London. I played on the other wing. I had 18 and a half stone on the other wing.
Okay.
So that's where you saw the Fatties Club. Saracens at the time had the Fatties Club. We had two monster centers and a fullback. At a time where wingers were like 12 stone, 12 and a half stone.
Yeah.
There was no need, nobody saw the need for bulk. But at school, I was doing 100 meters in 10.8, 10.9 seconds.
Interesting.
So
At 18 stone.
yeah.
Wow.
At school, I was 16, 17.
Okay.
So you had power and burst, both in offense and in defense. And the coaches at the time decided that's where they wanted to use that explosive power in that way. I didn't have the lungs to run back row, so that's where I ended up.
Okay. What doesn't the world know about? I know we see so much of you, from the profile to the pictures to the positions, but what doesn't the world know about Herbert Mensah that he would want them to know? If any.
Not a lot. I generally keep a lowish profile. Pretty private. I've got an extraordinary wife who I don't deserve. I have 4 wonderful girls.
Oh, girl dads.
I've got girls, who I speak to virtually every day.
Okay.
Yesterday at the park, I was in a meeting and one of them called, so I was watching the Zim match, and for 15 minutes, she was on the line, on Zoom, on video,
Yeah.
and I was talking to, so they're very important. I do everything myself, so I don't use a secretary. I drive myself. I cook my own food. I clean my own
Doing
car.
everything yourself, doesn't that make you in a way a micromanager?
Nope.
In some ways?
I definitely don't micromanage.
Okay.
Business, I give responsibility and I give massive latitude. But I believe that you do things yourself. So I'm called Herbert, I'm not called President. You can't carry my bag, I carry my own bag. You know, there is no big man stuff out there. You know, and so if you wake up on time, I wake up 4 a.m. Latest 4 a.m. I love dogs. I've got Brazilian Mastiffs in West Africa who are 70, 80, 85 kilos.
Wow.
So I go out with them in the morning. I have 6 in the house. I do a few Ks and I come. I have private gyms in all my homes. Big gyms. Big gyms.
Okay.
So I gym, I work out. I do my work. Early morning is when is the best time to get me. And then I get into it. I have an 88, 89-year-old mom. I cook for her 4 days a week.
Okay.
So these are all things that people do not know.
Interesting.
I buy my own food, so I go to the market to choose the vegetables, the meat, the fish, the seafood, the whatever else is required, and I make it work from there.
On days when you're not motivated, what keeps you going?
What keeps me going? A realization that I'm nobody.
That you're nobody. Sure, I think that's a little harsh to say about yourself.
No. If you recognize that you're nobody, you can continue aspiring to be better than you are.
Okay.
If you think you're all that, your ego will soon take a swipe and you'll be knocked sideways. So I'm not aspiring for what other people are. I'm not aspiring for fancy clothes, or I may have a selection of nice vehicles in another part of the world, but it's not important. It really is not important. So when I'm not, I can switch off quite easily. You meet people to share a joke with, you go into town, you talk to somebody in town. You know, there is no agenda that says you got to wear a suit or a tie, you got to show that you're this, or walk with an entourage, or something. No. And be ready, because life is so temporary. You're here today, you're dead tomorrow.
True.
You're here in this position today, you're gone tomorrow.
True.
You know, and a lot of people battle with that. They battle with the fact that they were the president of a country, and then tomorrow they're no longer president. You know, and somebody else is the president.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect me one bit.
What's your life mantra?
My life mantra? Do unto others as you wish they to do unto you.
Interesting. So let's just get a little bit into these quick fire conversations or questions, and then we can start to conclude. So the first one, you already talked about cooking your own food, but what's your favorite food?
Depends what I cook.
Depends.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a carnivore. But I make my own relishes. I make my side dishes. If I had my own house here, I'm massively impressed with some of your fruit. Just a few days, I've tasted a lot of fruit, which we have in other parts, but I'm impressed. And I use that as a basis for relish. I haven't seen all your peppers, because West Africa, we have serious.
I don't think we're big on
No, you're
a lot
not,
of pepper.
you see. So
Yeah.
my relishes would have, you've got sweet peppers that have got beautiful aromas and are not too hot. You've got others that are massively hot.
Yeah.
Garlics, the gingers, turmeric, stuff that you then blend and put in, and then I use the fruit as a base, olive oil on top. So if you do that, you can use it as a basis to season. The critical issue is that essence of food that is good. So the meat must be good, the cut must be right. But you must be able to season it lightly with something that people don't understand what the taste is. They're just biting and thinking, oh my God, that's so nice. What is it? Where did it come from? Oh, let me take another bite. And that for me is the essence essentially of where I go with a lot of cooking.
Okay. So, as Rugby Africa president, are you allowed to have a rugby team to support?
Oh, I
know
support a lot of teams. Yesterday, I'm there hoping everybody does well. Believe me, we have 1 to 8 teams. I need them all to do well. But I was rooting for Uganda as well. I mean, look, Burkina are my next door neighbors. But I've seen the work that you're doing here. Petri and Namibia, I love them dearly.
Okay.
But I lived in Zim one point in my life. I saw magical movement and tries. I couldn't help but jump from my seat and say, well done. Algeria, I know how much time and effort the president has put into his team. And he wants his team to go to the World Cup. So at the end of the match, I'm 5 meters away. And they score. And I wish there was a picture because he's a big man, eh? And this big man runs up and jumps up on me, and he's so happy, and I'm happy for him.
Yeah.
So it's over now, and I'm neutral again, But I do like, and if Africa goes to World Cup, I support Africa. I went to World Cup wearing the Springbok tie and shouting for the Springboks all day long. So, yeah.
Okay. Your ideal holiday destination?
I don't do holidays, so if I was to go as I did in the old days, it would have to be a place where it's good for the kids too.
Okay.
Go to a place that is not tourist-based. If you were to come to Uganda, then I'd be asking Godwin, are there places that we could go that people don't normally go to? Are there things that are child-friendly? If it's a hotel, you got to make sure that the basic things are in place for them. But there are so many beautiful places around the world. I've been down the Amazon off the back of Suriname and seen Ashanti culture there. Villages with stools and cloth, people calling themselves Kofi and Ghanaian names. So the old slaves who then entered into Paramaribo and managed to run away from the capital into the jungle and set up their own clan. All these years later, the culture is still rich there, and that has shocked me.
Okay.
So I've been to South America, and I thought, wow, that was something. I went to Venezuela and ate rice and beans that were done West African style, and I thought, whoa, that's interesting. The Far East, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Thailand, the fruit in Thailand, the street food, there are places that are holidays that I just think are extraordinary. And because I like food and scenery and people, and you can make most things work.
Okay. Last time you had a night out?
What do you mean by night out? Somebody took me for dinner the other day. I don't know the place.
I don't
it was
think
interesting.
that's
So that was kind of cool.
Clubbing and a party?
No, I ain't clubbed and party. Even when I was young, I was not really.
You never
into
used to?
No, I went out, but it depends on the mission.
On
the
mission?
Yeah, because if it's good music, I got a great sound system. You see, it depends on the mission. Is it to meet people? Then you have to decide. And I'm not a pack rat.
You're not a pack rat.
Okay. You stay singular in your focus in your mission, whether it's for music or whether it's for company or whatever. And there have been some great clubs I've been to in my life, but as I've matured, I've realized that output, money spent, time wasted back home what was the mission? You know, your pocket's still full, or they empty at the end of it.
Fondest childhood memory for you?
Oh, childhood. How old is childhood?
Up to 18.
Just a bit over 18 would be, I started doing private business in my teens. And by 21, I'd actually made quite a bit of money. And being able to buy a car and a watch for my mother
Okay.
is probably the, other than being present for the birth of my kids, which I was, with at least,
With all the travel?
with 3 kids. 3 kids, I was there. They were born in Europe. I cut the umbilical cord. The nurse handed me my kids. Those are situations that cannot be replicated or equal. But looking after my mother and looking at the look in her eye for a child that had been so troublesome, always involved in some skit, didn't know his own strength, challenged authority, and then coming good for her
Okay.
has always been special, which is why even now at 64, I'm still cooking for my mom. I speak to her 5 times a day at least. I'll have spoken to my mom and we'll chat about nothing and make sure she's okay. So that's what matters.
Okay. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
To let everybody understand for once, do unto others as you wish they do unto you. You see, that verse from our own Abrahamic background tells you everything. It takes away fighting. It takes away hatred. It takes away the killing of people in Gaza. It takes away an Anglophone person having a problem with Francophone, a Francophone person pretending it's not because you're Anglophone. It takes away that and lets people focus on the good. It helps people come together and say, let's farm the land and provide food for everybody else. It helps us saying that that person's child is disabled. Help him because your child's child might be disabled.
Yeah.
It gives you empathy. It gives you care. It gives you understanding. Then the richness upon which you are built and born as a group, that genetically, that you're a group of people who have everything, can really excel in the world and change lives.
Look, basing on your character, what animal or creature do you think you are?
I guess it changes with time. I've never really thought about it. You know, I have never really thought about it. I won't go there.
Okay. Weirdest gift you've ever received?
Weirdest gift was from one of my best friends. She's still one of my best friends, whose father was a doctor. She gave me a paperweight,
Okay.
which was actually a hip joint.
Okay.
So dad was doing hip replacement surgery. So a ball hip joint, that was kind of weird. I still have it.
You kept it.
Never been used, but I still have it. Yeah.
And the last one, are you a morning person or a night owl?
Morning.
Morning.
I start at 4 a.m.
Okay. What time do you go to bed?
I try to be closing down by 9:10.
9, 10.
I try to be closing down by that time.
You try. Anyway, so on the grander scheme of things, what's your dream for Africa? You've indulged in business, you're in sports, you're everywhere.
Africa just needs to wake up and understand how special it is. Yeah, if they do, they just stop fighting amongst each other. Black people just fight with each other. They need to stop it. I see it in Rugby Africa. I saw it in football. People spend their energies destroying one another. Just imagine if they used all that negative energy, put it into positive energy. Africa would be ahead of everybody in the world. You know, a familiar name, sake of mine, Thomas Mensah, you can Google him, died recently. And he invented a whole load of telephony in America that is developing the telephone industry in America. And I had the occasion to once speak to him, and he's talking about the fact that his own people in Africa don't want to deal with it. And I found so many brilliant Africans who are not welcome back home. You can come visit, you can come do things. But we're not looking at the excellence of working together as one, accepting the fact that we can have a difference of opinion as one.
Yeah.
You'll accept a difference of opinion with a foreigner, but you won't accept a difference of opinion with your own self. And then within that whole scheme and frame, for Africa to get it and say that, you know what, the people who run the system are 50, 60 years older than the people who can make a difference. We need to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily getting rid of old people, but we need to bridge that gap. And if we can bridge that gap, we can achieve anything.
Okay. Do you do mentorship programs or do you mentor any younger people?
I have a lot of people who inbox me and a lot of people, I try to not become a godlike figure to people. It's so important. So I've got 30, 40 people, maybe 50 who've named their children after me, which I don't like. I do not like, because they're individuals. They've got to be themselves.
Yeah.
And I do play social media, although I don't say anything sensible on it.
Yeah.
But
I noticed your social media is, if it's not about Rugby Africa, there is really not that much.
I don't talk, my social media being Facebook primarily. My public page has nearly 800,000 people on it. And I don't say anything intelligent on it. And I don't talk rugby on it either.
Not big on Twitter, because Twitter is what I paid attention to mostly.
I hardly do any Twitter. I had a big Twitter account. Somebody hacked it and it was closed. So I had 10, 15,000 people on my Twitter account. Twitter never gave it back to me. It's gone. I've opened another one. There's nobody on it. Facebook is nearly 800,000 people on the public page. And
Instagram, are you all about the selfies and the nice photos?
No. You very rarely see a picture of me anywhere, unless it's handing out an award for somebody.
Yeah.
I find that I got to be in a position to try and influence others or inspire other people.
Yeah.
Give them a sense of hope
Yeah.
by being a little bit different. Not about talking about me.
Okay. All right. Very, very interesting. Any final remarks? Of course, I am pretty sure, because much as I have understood that you come from a place of humility, there are a lot of people that look up to you, there are a lot of people that look at what you're doing, and this particular podcast is going to be watched not only by Ugandans and very many people. So what would your final words be to them?
I think I've said it all in what I've said in terms of have empathy for one another. Believe in yourself. Oh yeah, the other thing I never said is never give up.
Okay.
Never ever give up. You're running a young business here. Are the angles right? Only you can tell. Yeah. Are you following a given path that others do in other places? I don't know. It's only about being different that you'll succeed.
Okay.
Never give up. Be strong. Work with one another. And for heaven's sake, be proudly black and African. The black is not necessary because Africa, we are yellow, white, Arabic.
Yeah.
So I'm using that in the broader sense
Yeah, in
of
the
the
African
word.
sense.
Absolutely. Not. It's not a color thing.
Yeah.
It's not a color thing. But keep working hard. Give hope to whoever listens to you. Try and get to the point where your gravitas is so big because you switch on, you've got over 100,000 people connected to you and listening.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to eventually become a spider and tag yourself into 5, 6 other countries who are doing similar work, and it all becomes one into a bigger unit.
Yeah.
Build a base so that you have a base that goes to the commercial world and says, if these people are talking to 100,000 people at any one time, or 200,000 people at any one time, we need to take $1 spend and come and give it to you.
I do appreciate, of course, it has been an hour and more, but it's been a great conversation. Finding you was not easy. Of course, the background of this whole conversation started from the point of the email that was sent and being patient and trying to find the right time and waiting for you to fly in and so many of the things. But I hope on a less formal occasion we can enjoy the rugby on Sunday and we can have more rugby conversations and life conversations. But thank you for your time. We do appreciate, of course, myself and the team And of course, I'm sure the viewers are going to appreciate this one so much. Ladies and gentlemen, for you, Rugby Africa President Herbert Mensah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening in. Share with us your thoughts from today's episode, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.